My name is Devin McLaughlin. I'm the Director of Professional Services for PathLock Native ABAP tools. So my team is responsible for the global implementation of PathLock Native ABAP tools. And I've been working with SAP Security since '96 and doing and governance, risk, and compliance. That was well before SOX came out. And so anyway, I've been around a long time, seen a lot, have a lot of information to pass along. So Stephanie asked me if I could deliver this webinar, which will be covering the inefficiencies and SOD analyses. So just a quick agenda. We'll do an overview of those inefficiencies. We'll talk about the SOD rule sets, custom versus out of the box, incorporating organizational values into your SOD analysis, mitigating risk with firefighters, and then can do versus did do. The way all SOD analysis tools are built, um, they're all coming with the SOD rule set as part of it. And it's got built-in inefficiencies. And these lead to lost business productivity, higher support costs, and increased security risks. So why do they do that? Why is it that way? I think originally it was just this is the way we can do these SOD analysis, and over time now we've got the ability to push some of these inefficiencies out of the system. So you know that's I guess ultimately why we're here today. Still, in most processes, they're just inefficient, and but it's not like lost business productivity. So we know users then have an SOD issue, so they have to wait to get that resolved before they can get access. So they got lost business productivity. Now, that's costing the company real money, but how do you measure it? Is it measured? The security team, if they're working under IT or in general, or even under the SAP owner, um, they're not tracking that. Somebody sitting twiddling their thumbs getting access waiting a week is not able to do their job. That's just kind of law out there. It's lost. It's real for sure, again, real money, but it's just not easily measured. So today's webinar, we're going to talk about these inefficiencies, including real world examples, and then ways to lessen the impact of these inefficiencies. So all the SOD solutions, SAP SOD solutions, including PathLock's own, come with a rule set out of the box. Maybe it's called default rule set, whatever you call it, comes with a basic rule set. And ours, SAP's, it doesn't matter. For us, about half our customers use the rule set as is. They take it, again, out of the box, implement it, and just run with it. The other half take extra time and care to ensure the rule set is specific for them. So we know most everybody uses custom transactions. Some organizations use thousands and thousands of them. Some of them are SOD related and need to be included in the rule set. So that's one of the issues. And so, yeah, you can use what's exactly out of the box, but if you've created these custom transactions, then getting those included in your rule set can ensure then you're tracking everything. The rule set, again, out of the box, has the criticality of each risk set. So is this a critical risk? Is it a high risk, medium, low, whatever? And tools will let you adjust that, create new, more than the 5 basic risk levels, criticalities. But the rules out of the box come set based off experience. So our rule set, we had input from auditors, years and years and years and years and years of that, having it reviewed internally, We've brought in outside experts to take a look at it, and we've set them how we believe they need to be set. But ultimately, every organization is different. The level of risk that some organizations are willing to, or able to, or willing to accept is different. So part of this customizing the rule set means looking at that and saying, yeah, this is truly a critical thing, or it's a low, it's marked critical, but we need to adjust it so that it's low, because we just don't care about that. Maybe we're not using that area of the system, so we don't want to delete it from the rule set entirely, but we want to um, have it out there so we can make it a low. Some customers, got one in particular, who, as part of their provisioning process, do SOD checks, which is very normal, but they only look at the criticals and the highs as part of that process. So they're not slowing down the provisioning process by looking at every risk. Well, if you're only looking at some things, then it's very important that you look at the right things. So again, what's critical is truly critical, not just, hey, this is a bad deal if it happened, but looking at the probability of it happening, the potential impact, the dollar impact for some of these things can help. It's not just that gut feeling of what the level should be. So that alone can speed up moving things if you're only looking at the criticals and highs, adjusting things, getting rid of risks that aren't really critical or high can speed up then your provisioning process, which makes that process more efficient. So that again, that criticality is an important thing to look at. It also drives how much you have to look at, because not everybody all the time looks at every high, medium, and low. So again, focusing in on what's really important and moving the other things to later makes sense. Now, the other thing about it, these default rule sets, is they're set, we don't want to miss anything. Let me just put it that way. So there may be 5 security objects checked by SAP when executing a transaction. So we've determined that if we check 2, then we're going to catch everything. But maybe we're catching too much stuff. So looking for false positives, if you, for your organization, you really need to be more specific than going into the rule set and saying, yep, we see here it's checking for these 2 things, create the activity, create and modify or delete. But there are other objects that are being checked by SAP, then you can add in those additional objects or activate them if they're already there. And that will tighten up your rule set so that you're only showing those things that you want to see. Again, these false positives, it's showing in the report is having an SOD issue, but from your perspective, it's not really an SOD issue. So spending the time to go through those scenarios, truly understanding your rule set is another way to tighten it up. So our recommendation in general is that you do take the time. Again, getting the software installed, getting the default rule set in use is what you've got to do, but coming back and really honing in on that rule set to tighten it up as much as possible is the best course of action, we believe. So again, I just should have gone to the next slide before I said that last statement, but again, we recommend you take your time to review it. It's especially important if you're moving to S4HANA that you review it, because there are thousands and thousands of new transaction codes, new authorization objects, SOD relevant Fiori applications. So not every, not, and so if you've got your static rule set you've implemented prior to S4, then it needs to be updated. And so the PathLock native ABAP solution called Separations Enforcer does actually include functionality to assist with that migration. So you're able to see what's happening, the old transactions, the new transactions, and then make updates to your rule set accordingly. Now we've also got, if you've got an older version of Separations Enforcer installed, if you've already got it installed, we've got the ability, you can see the newest rule set, do a comparison between the newest rule set and your current rule set, and so then go through those differences too. So we make that as easy as well. But S4, the movement to S4 is a big driver for updating your rule set. All right, the next item on the agenda is incorporating organizational values into your SOD analysis. And this one is a particularly big and difficult thing. In the past, it was a difficult thing to do. So the example I always use is with accounts payable. When I first started with SAP, I supported accounts payable as well as security, so I tend to use it in my examples. So from an SOD perspective, the general SOD perspective, you're doing an analysis. If you've got the ability to create a vendor, the security objects to create a vendor, and the security objects to post an invoice, you're going to get flagged as having a violation, an SOD violation. Doesn't matter what the tool is. That's just the way it's going to flag. So you've got to separate, obviously the roles have to have that stuff separated out, or you accept the risk, however you handle it. But that's a real world example of what happens. Now, in reality, if you create a vendor on a company code and you post an invoice to a different company code, that's not an SOD violation. Nobody cares about that. But most rule sets won't flag that because organizational values, company codes, plans, purchasing orgs, none of that is generally included in your SOD rule set. So you just have a basic create a vendor, post an invoice. And so it's going to flag everything, which again means then people are being flagged whose access actually isn't a problem. So the way to do it is to incorporate those org values into company codes, plans, whatever, warehouses, into your rule set. Now the tradition, and this has been possible, you could have done this for the last 15 years or 20 years, however long it is. But it's extremely difficult. You've got to put all those company codes into every rule, all those plans, the warehouses, purchasing orgs, all the different combinations, and those things tend to change. Maybe not every day, but every year, every 2 years. So you're constantly then going into your rule set. Once you get it there, you got 60 company codes, all got to go in your rule set. And so it just becomes a maintenance nightmare. And so that's why nobody's done it. It's just difficult to do. Now, certainly there are a lot of organizations that are smaller and you've maybe got a couple of company codes. Well, it's probably not worth it certainly isn't worth it even for a couple of company codes to go out there and maintain it and your rule set for that. But that's the dilemma. You want, again, we're talking about inefficiencies and how we can drive inefficiencies out of this process. And so not flagging somebody as having a violation when they don't is kind of important to getting rid of the efficiencies. So, and so what PathLock has done with the Separations Enforcer tool, we've created, I mean, we recognized this was a problem years ago. many years ago, and so worked to fix it. We created some functionality called Dynamic Matrix that lets you pull your org values easily and incorporate it into your rule set and maintain, and then it makes it easy to maintain it going forward. So generally, for large organizations, it takes us a couple of weeks to get this set up. All your org values are there. They're in your rule set. They're able to be used quickly. And so then when you're doing your SOD analysis, again, in my example with accounts payable, you've got vendor create in one company code, invoice posting in another company code. It's not going to show up anymore. And whether it's in the provisioning process or whether it's in just a monthly review or quarterly review, however often you do the SOD analysis and look at the results, that stuff's not going to show up anymore. So this is a dynamic matrix. Dynamic matrix lets you then make your SOD rule set more accurate, getting rid of those inefficiencies. So I think it's pretty cool. Again, not everybody has a lot of company codes, org values, plans, whatever. So it doesn't make sense for everyone to do it, but certainly for those organizations, then it lets you tighten. Again, you can tighten your security up. So, and you're only causing people that have true violations to actually be reviewed. All right, so this next topic, mitigating risk with firefighters. So I mentioned that I've been working with SAP Security and GRC for SAP since before Sarbanes-Oxley got passed. And initially, everything was just focused on security. And then once SOX came in, then it was, well, how are we going to deal with this? And one of the first, and I still think best ways to deal with it is with firefighters. Now, whatever your tool is, it's a privileged access management, a PAM tool, whether it's called firefighter, whether it's Pathlock's tool, emergency repair, they're all doing basically the same thing, right? You need extra access, you check it out, it's logged, somebody has to review the logs. So, but when these tools first came out, the big selling point for them was, this is the way to resolve your SOD conflict. So somebody, again, using that example for accounts payable, you've got both sides of the creative vendor and you've got posting an invoice. Well, you could, with firefighter, give somebody access to create a vendor through a firefighter. So if they didn't do it all the time, let's say they were just the backup, but you didn't want them to get flagged with an SOD violation all the time, but you needed them to be the backup. And you didn't want to, when their coworker was out of town on vacation or out sick, you didn't want to have to go in and request the extra access because maybe your provisioning process is kind of cumbersome. So one of the ways to do that, or a way to do that, is with firefighter. So instead of giving them that access full time to create a vendor when they're only the backup, they've got the ability to check out a firefighter ID or firefighter role that will then give them that ability. So they have invoice create all the time, they're doing that, and then when they're the backup, then they can just, through a few keystrokes, go check out this extra emergency access, firefighter access, and then go create a vendor. And it's logged, and it's not going to show up as an SOD violation, but yet it's being reviewed. So it's logged, someone's got to review the log. So if somebody is up to no good, and they're like, oh, I'll just use this firefighter to create a vendor and then post an invoice to it, they're going to wonder, why are you doing that? And the person reviewing the logs will ask some questions and look to see if anything weird happened and then approve it if it's okay. So you're getting the review of it, you're letting the people, in this case, a backup, efficiently get to the access that they need because they're the backup, they need it. It's just, what's the best way to give it to them, most efficient way, and because this is an SOD violation, because if you just said, okay, Joe, you're going to request this access when Bob is out sick or on vacation. And then it's going to go through the provisioning process. If you've got a tool that's going to flag it, then it'll get flagged and that'll get held up. But meanwhile, the other person's on vacation or out sick. So there's somebody who you still, now the business is suffering. With firefighter, then you've got the ability to have this so they can check it out when they need it, and it's going to be reviewed, and only when it's needed, right? So you could request the access, and then you're going to have that review happen. The provisioning tool will reach out and do the SOD analysis and flag it, say, hey, you got to look at this. And the person may never actually use it. They're just getting the access because the other person's on vacation or out sick. So you're causing extra work. Well, with firefighter, if they don't need it, aren't going to ask for it. So no one's looking at it and wasting time looking at something that may never be used. So it just makes them that efficient. And then certainly again, if they do need to execute it, then it's going to be looked at. So you're looking at only the stuff that actually needs to be looked at. Now this whole approach has fallen out of favor, and I'm not really sure why. I'm a practical guy. I've got a tool, it solves a problem, it does it efficiently. I'm going to use it. So, which is why it's on this slide. This is still a valid approach. It still solves problems, and it does it as efficiently as can be done, which again, for this webinar, it's how can we get these inefficiencies out of the process. So maybe every potential risk you could have, if you got thousands of users, this could get out of control. So maybe you say, okay, we're going to do this for those criticals and the highs. Maybe that's what you do. And then you've got the backups, everything set up efficiently to handle those guys. Maybe that's the way if you've got too many big issues. But either way, this still works, still solves the problem, and it does it efficiently and effectively. So, and again, emergency repair, the PathLock native ABAP tool allows you to easily do this. All right, the last item on the agenda is the can do versus did do. And so these are new terms, recent terms, maybe new is not the right word. So what this is, your traditional SOD analysis tool are now being called can do tools because it shows you what you have access to do, what you can do. So, and again, in my accounts payable example, if you have the ability to create a vendor and post an invoice, you can do those two things. You can execute that risk, both sides of the conflict. So that's what we mean when we're talking about can do. But these tools aren't able to show you what you've actually done. So there's another kind of tool to monitor your SAP landscape so you can see people that actually executed SOD conflicts or what people did do. Did Devin create a vendor and then post an invoice to that vendor? Right, so the can do says, do you have access to create a vendor, and do you have access to post an invoice to a vendor? The did do tools are very specific. Did you create a vendor and then post an invoice to that vendor? Not any vendor, that vendor. From an SOD perspective, if I create vendor A and I post an invoice to vendor B, that's not an SOD violation. It doesn't matter what the can do tool said, because I can post an invoice to a vendor that I created, but the did do is only looking at that specifically. So it's very specific. Did you execute an SOD conflict? Not did you execute the parts of it, but the whole thing. Creating that vendor and then posting an invoice to that exact vendor. That's the violation. So in one sense, the can-do tools are looking at very broadly what people can do, but the did-do tools are filtering through all of this to get to the crux of the issue, the actual SOD violation executions. So you can spend, and I know I don't think this is broadly accepted, but I mean, you still have to do can do, but it's so broad what you're looking at. Again, you're looking at the whole world when you care about one little thing actually happening. And in my mind, that's way more efficient, and more time should be spent on what actually happened rather than, well, what could possibly go wrong? Because anything can possibly go wrong. There's all sorts of things. And people have had SOD access violations from a can-do tool. You could have that for years and years and years, and you just never you do it. And but we spend so much time focused on those, and rightfully so. I mean, that's what the auditors are looking at. But we're seeing a shift over to the did-do tools. We're getting more customers asking about it, wanting to have these things implemented. Now, PathLock Native ABAP has two did-do tools: access violation management, risk analysis, AVMRA, and automated mitigation. And they do the same thing, but do them differently. But again, the goal is the same, to show. So certainly if you're ready to, if your compliance work is mature enough, you're doing all you can with the can-do tools, you're as efficient as you can be using this information in the presentation, you'll be able to tighten that up, hopefully. Once you've done all that, then you're ready to focus on the did do and actually find the real problems. And again, so depending upon your use case, how your SAP system is set up, then one or the other will make sense, and our sales guys can help you with that. But that's the big thing, again, that we're focusing on. We're seeing a lot more interest in, and that's these did do tools. Now, they're not plug and play. Everybody configures SAP differently, different risks, and certainly it probably doesn't make sense from a return on investment to set up these controls so that you're monitoring every single thing. We've got customers, and that's what the tools let you do, is filter this stuff out. You may say, well, while we would like to look at everything, every actual violation and track everything down to the penny, we just don't have the people to do that. All right, so the tool lets you set up filters. So maybe you don't care about $25 transactions that somebody did. Maybe you care about $25,000 transactions, and that's the stuff you only want to look at. So we're able to, with both tools, to set up that filtering so then you're really only seeing exactly what you want. Now we can capture lots of stuff, but if you do, what are you going to do with it? You're going to be overloaded. So the important thing with both of these tools is the did do tools is to set up the filtering, the parameters, the configuration so that you're only seeing the stuff you want to see. And then you're able to really deal with it and find out, is it appropriate, is it inappropriate? And that's what these tools do. They lay that right there at your lap. So it's pretty slick. I like this. I like the direction that's going, and we're certainly making improvement to the tools always. So the processes are getting better every month. So let's see, I already talked I think I talked about all of this, but from this slide, yeah, and just to touch on one more thing here, and I already mentioned this once, and that's Again, you can have your full SOD rule set, and we can come through and we can say, okay, for the did do tools, we'll put a control in place to monitor each and every one. We would love to do that. But realistically, some of these are going to be um, some of these are just going to be really simple to do. Just as an example, um, I had a customer was supporting that we had LDAP sync hooked up. So as users were pulled out of LDAP, they were pulled out of SAP. And they had a real tight process for getting, as leavers, people left or went on leave, sick leave or whatever it was, they got locked in the network. And then we pulled that into SAP immediately. So it was a real tight process to shut down users. So I didn't have to delete users. And we deleted users in SAP. And I know a lot of people just lock them, but either way, we could have locked them, but they're tied up. So I didn't need to delete users. Now, having the security access I had plus deleting users was an SOD violation, plain and simple. Now, yeah, we could have put in an AM control, automated mitigation control, that said, watch for Devin deleting a user plus whatever else. But I did those so I deleted the user to a year. It was like a system ID. So the system IDs weren't being locked. So if I needed to create a system ID or delete a system ID, then I did. So, but it was real easy just to run a report. So my boss ran a report and looked at it. Took 2 minutes, 3 minutes, whatever it was. And he knew every deletion I did. So if there was something weird in there. So he can take 2 or 3 minutes, 5 minutes to run a report, or we could have spent 20 hours implementing an AM control to monitor it. Well, from a return on the investment perspective, 5 minutes, 20 hours, it, it would have taken him, I don't know, I'm not a math wizard, but it would have taken him decades to make that make sense from a financial perspective. So it was just easier not to implement an AM control, but to let him run that report. Now, eventually, we actually switched over to Firefighter. So if I needed to delete a user, I checked out Firefighter ID. So he didn't even have to run a report. He checked it real time and saw what I did. So and knew it was either right or wrong. So that made it even more efficient. So there are going to be plenty of times when it doesn't make sense to implement the did do controls. But there are other times when it makes immense amount of sense to do it. You're spending hundreds of hours across the organization, whether you've got 200 or 300 people doing it, whether you've got 600 people doing it. There's a lot, big organizations have spent a lot of time monitoring this stuff, and they're looking at stuff that may not be a problem. So better to, again, more efficient is to use a tool that helps you focus right in on that. So anywho, so those are the did do tools. Now, again, this is kind of the newish concept. And so if you, we'll have a QA, and if you got any questions, we'll answer those. But certainly down the line, be thinking about it. And if you've got questions, then you can come back to us and certainly ask those. And we can talk to you about it, do some demos, whatever it takes to help you understand what this is and get it on your radar. So you may not be ready to do this now, but this is what's happening. People are doing this more and more, trying to gain these efficiencies, and these did do controls are so much more efficient than the can do. So, and then again, the big thing about it too is the audit trail. When if you're running a report, you store it, soft copy, hard copy, the auditors come in, they do some sampling, and you've got to pull out your stuff and show it to them. with the did do tools, it's all in the tool. They can see it, they can sample it themselves, they don't have to bug you. You looked at the violation that was executed, you documented it, say, yep, I looked at it, it's okay. It's all right there in the tool. So it makes that process, the audit process, also more efficient too. So I don't want to lose sight of that. All right, just to wrap things up now. So I'm a little bit over time, a little longer than I expected, but just bottom line is SOD analysis processes are inefficient. They just are. But they're costing your organization time and money. Now, if you got bigger issues, bigger fish to fry, then that's okay. You got to deal with that stuff. But ultimately, you're going to need to get to this, tackle these inefficiencies. And one of those ways is customizing your rule set, incorporating custom transactions, updating it for the S4 migration. The next one, big thing you can do is the org values, incorporating those in your rule set, doing that in an efficient way. The fourth is to utilize your emergency access tool where possible to mitigate these conflicts. Do the reporting. I gave you a couple of examples of that, including deleting those users. That just sped up that process, made it a lot more efficient. And then lastly, it's incorporating did do tools into your mitigating control process, looking for when people actually did something you care about, as opposed to potentially having the ability to do it. All right, so that takes us to the Q&A. I don't know, Stephanie, did we have any questions come in?
I'm not seeing any questions at the moment, but I would just like to say if you do have any questions in the future for us, you can reach out to us at info@pathblock.com, and we are happy to answer any of those questions or demo any of our products for you. And with that, we just want to say thank you very much, and we hope you have a wonderful day.